ideal client standpoint, that who would stand to be the best purchaser?
I hadn't thought about Mark Cuban with him stepping away from his
Speculation.
role. At the
Facebook and Instagram, like Meta shut down a few times over the last few years. Like the importance.
Jeff Bezos is living a pretty enjoyable life at the moment, not dealing with most things Amazon.
Welcome to today's episode of Off the Record Marketing Deconstructed. On the podcast today, we are diving into the world of TikTok. It's been a trending topic lately, whether it's going to stay in the US, whether somebody's going to buy it, what should I do with my growth, my advertising, my channel. We dig into all of that today. Enjoy. In our last podcast, we were talking about ideal client. And I was thinking about this in regards to what's going on with TikTok in our country. And again, this conversation could go in lots of different directions because of the political and the social and, the harm that is being talked about around this particular platform. But I was kind of curious about if the Chinese have to sell their stake in TikTok, which it sounds like if we want to keep it in the US.
I believe it was signed yesterday, though it is official. They do have 9 months to sell.
They want to, right? Yep. And then I think there's on top of that 9 months, there's like a 3-month extension.
If there's an agreed upon sale that is going through all the all the process. Yeah.
Yeah. I would be curious from an ideal client standpoint that who would stand to be the best purchaser of TikTok based on who's on that platform. And should it be a company? I mean, most likely a lot of this is like venture capitalists or, people that want to invest and whatever. But if you look at who TikTok targets, who would be in line to maybe be a purchaser for that based on that demographic? Thoughts on that?
I don't know this offhand, but I'd be curious, was when Elon was in the market for Twitter, were there other people who were interested in buying that? Because if not, if it's somebody who is not specifically trying to get TikTok, but they're just trying to get in social media with an established name, I feel like that could be a heavy favorite. Once again, I don't know.
My guess is that with the way Elon lobbied for buying Twitter for so long, that the answer is probably no. But maybe that's why his bid to buy it was so astronomically higher than what their stock valuation was, because there was a competitor. I don't know. I don't remember the timeline, but there was talks about this when TikTok was relatively new, about this idea of having concern over the Chinese government's ownership and what access and information and security and all that. And I believe that Oracle was, which is California-based, right? Mm-hmm. Tech company. I believe that they had kind of stepped up and were considering.
When it came up the first time,
yes,
they did.
And this is a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
I believe President Trump was still in office, but since then, I don't know if they would. I mean, I haven't heard any rumblings of anyone considering it now. I do think that it would be very unwise of any of, like Google. I would not recommend it. I would not recommend Meta get into it. Say Elon, like any of the big ones currently, I wouldn't recommend it, just based on the way that we've seen social media platforms kind of trend and evolve over the course of time. I know Facebook did it with Instagram, and Instagram has fairly well stuck around. Mm-hmm. But I think based on the way that the user trends work, the content is kind of so vastly different there, that I think that there would be concern from the user base of the platform if there were significant changes from, Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or whatever.
What I think is interesting is that you've seen some of the commercials or like people talking about don't ban TikTok, don't do this because I'm a small business and creators and small business owners and things like that. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, from that standpoint, and those are the people, like, they're not talking to the teenagers that are using it, right? Yeah. That are spending 8 hours a day watching the videos and things like that. Yeah. They're not talking about some of the content that is being posted by influencers that is influencing decisions and things like that on the economy. They were focusing on people that it was going to directly hurt their pocketbook if it was banned. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, all of these small businesses, what if something like a LinkedIn, who you wouldn't think would ever go on a TikTok, because it's completely, you think from that standpoint, it's a very different environment. But if you think about creators, influencers, you think about small business owners, a lot of our clients have a TikTok presence, even though they don't do much with it, because they were able to build an audience really quickly in, the thousands, hundreds of thousands in some of these cases, right? And then you can take that audience and push it to different platforms. And so I'm wondering if something like a LinkedIn, who could promote some of these smaller businesses, and turn it into more of that type of a platform. I don't know. I was kind of thinking about that.
I do think it'd be very tough for them, given just the current constraints of what they do. With Facebook, with Instagram, even with Twitter to an extent, there was video elements, and they did have large, Facebook and Instagram specifically did have large portions of their content being video, and there is no story aspect to LinkedIn. There isn't, as far as I know, I don't think is there live?
Yeah, you can do LinkedIn Live.
But it's just very limited. So I just feel like it'd be a very different kind of acquisition from what they're used to doing, and it would just be, if they wanted to turn it into something more educational and more business focused, I think that would be great. But I think that'd be a major change from what they're currently.
They did for a while. LinkedIn was experimenting with the creator side of things, and you used to be able to go and record a video and put that like in your profile picture. It would be a video, and you could click on it, and you could talk like almost a video sales letter, right? A VSL about what you do and how you do it. I don't know if that would be something that they would want to go back and experiment or something. It would be a pretty major acquisition, though, I think, for LinkedIn. But I just was thinking, if somebody wanted to maybe use the platform for good or for business development or something like that, that might be a possibility. But it's probably going to be some, venture capitalist tech company or something like that ends up buying it and turns around and sells it for a bazillion dollars.
I think it's got to be somebody with the capital to support the influencers. If the influencers leave TikTok, the consumers will too. The everyday users will too.
There's a large competition for those people, and to have their Twitter is trying to do it a lot, trying to get more compensation toward people. I know, the obvious ones with YouTube and Twitch and Stream, everything like that. Having those influencers be on their platform mainly and only on their platform, there's a huge competition. So it has to be somebody who keeps in mind that that's a huge value that gets added.
Well, and what did you say the other day? TikTok started with a $50 million creator fund or something.
And I don't
know if those are the exact.
I don't have the exact numbers, but they prioritized influencers, right? They created this fund, and I don't know where their funding came from or how they gathered it, if it was advertising or if they had some type of VC type situation or whatever it was. But they had a fund that was just for creators, and I don't know. I think they handpicked creators even, or maybe there was an application or something like that. But they basically said, come create, move from Instagram to TikTok, and we'll give you money for the content you create on top of the deals that they did on their own, right? Yeah, if you just get these amount of eyeballs to our platform, we will pay you on top of whatever you're making, and it worked, right? It worked, and my understanding is there has been some cash flow issues, kind of. I don't know to what extent. I know that advertising on there is, at least I'm not an avid TikTok scroller or whatever, but my understanding is a lot of the advertising for in terms of paid, right? You're talking about smaller brands. It's a lot of it's organic, right? But the paid things, it's the big brands, right? You don't see people like we without Facebook ads, that we would have to shift entirely the way that we advertise, right? Because that's for businesses of all sizes.
Right.
My understanding is that's not how TikTok is typically operated.
Right.
So yeah, without the influencers and without being able to compensate those influencers appropriately, I don't know how TikTok stays on the same path that they have been on for the past handful of years.
Well, I feel like the creators, like going back to the small businesses, influencers, creators, like this is just another example. We've seen Facebook and Instagram, like Meta, shut down a few times over the last few years, like the importance of not keeping all of your eggs in one basket. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, the platforms are so wildly different content-wise. So I know that it takes more time to create for like YouTube versus Instagram versus TikTok, but like having, whether that is your newsletter list of like email subscribers, you own those emails. Like that is like so important to have in your back pocket. And on the other side of it, like, yeah, you might be predominantly TikTok, but getting in on Instagram or YouTube Shorts or trying to branch out, especially with this kind of deal on the table, like that's just so important.
I kind of wonder sometimes, how our government even passed the bill on it because of it being, I don't know if it's wholly owned or mostly owned by the Chinese government, or not Chinese government, but Chinese corporation or something like that. The question is, did these developers, when they developed TikTok, did they develop this and build it, and then the Chinese government stepped in and said, oh, we can look at it and use it and get information, all of this stuff? Or was it developed for that purpose?
I don't know. Maybe this is on us, right? I don't know the involvement the Chinese government has. I don't even know that they are involved, right? I don't want to say that they are or aren't. I think it's more so just the fear that they could be, right? And we know that just in other parts of the world, not just Asia, right? Not just China, but in other parts of the world, the way that the government operates is in some ways very similar, in some ways very different than the way we perceive our government to operate. And so I think it's more so the threat of, right? I think it's more so.
I think there are already countries too that have already banned it.
There have been, right?
Yeah.
And
the Chinese government has banned it in a different format.
Yeah, well,
in China.
I don't think it's unfair to say that this probably has a whole lot less to do with TikTok itself than it does with some of the other political, just the other political kind of topics, right, that we talk about, right? And I don't want to make it political. I just think that it's one of those things that we can control, right? We can't control certain elements of who China does dealings with, or any country does dealings. We can't control that, and it would be impossible for us to assume we can. But if it makes, I think the perception is that if it makes people feel a little bit better about their personal security or personal data, whatever, by controlling this, then we should take that opportunity when we have it. I don't know. I'm not a politician. I'm not going to pretend to know everything about the world's kind of socioeconomic involvement with other countries, but it feels based on fear, whether or not it's warranted is for all of us to make our own judgment on.
Yeah. I just think it's going to be interesting for whatever company potentially decides to do it, or purchase a minority, or majority holding in TikTok, and then how the platform changes. And then do we go into what's going on in social media right now too, is do we control the content that's on there? Do we control how it's viewed, how it's seen? And there's states, I think, that have passed laws now. Florida passed one on what age people can get onto social media platforms too, and how does that, there's just so many different nuances and things that go in it. But I will say that if you look at, and I brought this up, and you guys earlier, I brought this up and you were like, but if you look at the situation that happened with Grindr, which is an LGBTQ dating app, right, that was started by a Chinese developer, and the U.S. back in 2019 made the suggestion that it needed to be, I don't think it was a bill, but this has precedent, right? What we're talking about TikTok, this has precedent. And they basically said that we're going to ban it unless somebody that in the U.S. buys it or has a stake in it. And so somebody bought the company. It was I think a VC tech firm that bought it. And that was back in 2019, 2020 for like $608 million or something like that. And then in 2022, it was valued at $2.1 billion and went public. And so is that something that's going to happen with TikTok too? Like, it's a money game too. It's a money grab. It's one of those things. And I would think, and I don't know this, but I would think that TikTok probably has a significant value, if not the same as what happened with Grindr, or over and above it, right? Like, is that something that would appeal to somebody to actually buy it from an investment standpoint?
Well, and knowing that it's happened before, like I didn't know that happened before. So like that, I thought this was one of, this was the big thing, you know? Mm-hmm. So knowing that our government has that kind of sway and in this climate, but knowing like, Grindr is now doing above and beyond what it did in 2019. So will that be the case for TikTok? Or I think it depends upon the buyer, mm-hmm. What they turn it into, how they take the consumers into effect. And
yeah, it'll be very interesting. I think it's an interesting climate that we live in. It'll be interesting to follow this story and see what happens and what changes on the platform happen. And it's going to unfold here in the next year, and it's going to affect everything that we do from a marketing standpoint. We do social media for some of our clients on TikTok. We have a TikTok account. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds and how much money is made in the process.
This is this is that point where TikTok either becomes culturally relevant for the foreseeable future, right? I won't go as far as saying it's Facebook or Instagram, right? Just in terms of the longevity. Mm-hmm. But this is the point where it kind of makes or breaks it, right? And maybe even like, let's speculate a little bit, right? Because you're right. I think TikTok's valuation and impact right now significantly higher than Grindr in 2018 or 20 or whatever. I mean, significantly, right? I think 2.1 billion could be, I don't know, I'm not the expert here, but I wouldn't be surprised if you told me it was many
double that
times
at
that.
least.
Yeah.
So
So the pool of people that can even entertain that idea, even if they were to go in with
small,
it's very, very small, right? So we're going to know the name or the company. And I don't, again, like, this is just me totally making things up, right? But you look at the people who have an interest in like the societal impact of things, not necessarily social media, but just things, right? And again, if I'm speculating, like the first name that comes to mind to me is someone like a Mark Cuban-esque, right? Who has his hand in so many things, has ample amount of,
and is in that tech space.
Is in the tech space.
Yeah.
There's, he's a political guy in terms of he's very aware of what's going on. There are rumblings of a political career of some kind, right? Like, again, complete speculation. This is not, we're in Indiana. Mark Cuban is, well known around here as being
IU grad.
Yeah. But I guess my point is that that's the significance, right? Like Mark Cuban might have no interest, right? He might think it's a terrible idea, but we're talking about someone with that type of name recognition that has to be at the front of this line, because if they're not, I don't know what the options are.
I mean, it's the same thing with Twitter. It was like Elon was like, I didn't hear any other names.
Yeah.
It was.
I looked it up. It did not look like there was any particular people. And part of it was how much Elon bid. He said, if you either sell it to me or you sell it to nobody.
It's interesting though. Jack Dorsey, who owns Twitter.
Yes.
It was interesting because at first I think he was a little bit on the fence about whether they wanted to sell to Elon or not. But then after the transaction happened, Jack Dorsey totally endorsed it. It was very interesting, I think.
Well, it's his product. I don't think in any way he was going to do something where without good reason he was going to admonish anything that still had his stamp on it, because he started it, he ran it for a long time.
And I think at some point there was talk of him coming back into the organization after it was purchased.
Well, what's so interesting about his situation is that, I mean, Elon has basically, not him specifically, but Elon has thrown pre-Elon Twitter under the bus in so many different ways. And I'm not saying right, wrong.
Yes.
I'm saying he has done it.
I know.
And who was that? That's Jack Dorsey.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I don't think he's gotten a ton of flack necessarily. He's not necessarily in the public limelight, the way he was previously.
Yeah.
But I think that's an interesting comment because at the surface of it, he should be getting some flack if what Elon is suggesting is accurate and correct, and yet I don't see it. And also, because of your point about him coming back in, like, I don't know how much money he made in that whole acquisition, but is he a person that could come on TikTok, and is that good or bad based on the impression that we're getting from Elon?
Yeah, I don't know.
I hadn't thought about Mark Cuban with him stepping away from his
It's
role.
speculation.
At the Mavericks, he kind of stepped away and
he
sold
just sold
his bid.
majority stake.
Wait, and he stepped away from Shark Tank.
And he stepped away from Shark Tank. Obviously, complete speculation and just coincidence on there. I don't think he had any inside information to know that this was for sure going to happen. But that is an interesting person, given his tech background and the fact that, from an outsider's perspective, seems to be a billionaire that has at least a little bit of a conscience with the health plus drugs.
He's philosophical. At the very least,
cost
he's
plus
philosophical.
drugs and stuff like that.
I would agree with that.
He wears what he believes on his sleeve,
Yes,
and
exactly.
and doesn't seem like there's ulterior motives that he's working toward. He seems very outward with his thoughts, and willing to at least have discussions and not hide behind the fact that he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
So.
There's also the Amazon side of things with Jeff Bezos, who has said and has made moves to get into the media world.
Yep.
And he has the money to do it too. I don't know that that would be a good thing or not a good thing. I just think that that's a possibility.
Seems like to me Jeff Bezos is living a pretty enjoyable life at the moment, not dealing with most things Amazon.
Flying in his rocket ship.
I have to think, if Amazon was a headache for him, that TikTok would be a migraine.
Yeah, I know. But he did step in when he bought, what did he buy? The Washington something.
Post.
Is it the Post? I wasn't sure. I
And
didn't want to say the wrong thing.
There's a lot of discussion. I mean, as with any media outlet right now, a lot of politicizing of that, right? And whether information skews one way or the other. And I think
that's the point. That's the problem.
Yes. Yeah. That would be a knock on Jeff Bezos. I think in terms of the optics of Jeff Bezos buying it, I think that would be a knock on him.
Yeah. I would too. The way that our politics are right now going, I feel like there would be a lot of conversation around that purchase. So I don't know. Maybe we should contact Mark and see if
we broker that deal.
Right, we can broker that deal. We can get something out of it.
Too bad basketball season passed. Otherwise, we might be able to find him in Kirkwood after the game.
He was there not that long ago. We just got to hang out, and one day he'll come back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think our whole climate is going to be very interesting, especially how it relates in the marketing world and how people put their messages out on all these different social media platforms. And, are we ever going to get back to neutral territory as far as what gets posted, what gets shared, what gets flagged, what gets allowed, what gets, it'd be really nice to live in a more neutral climate, but at the same time, it probably wouldn't be very exciting.
Seems like you want to go to a time where people no longer have opinions, and that seems like that will be never.
But sure, yes, but as from the agency perspective, we're all about storytelling, right? And it's our job to make stories interesting, not because they're not interesting and we have to find a way to make them interesting, but it goes back to the target audience, right? And it goes back to the content types, and it goes back, the way that TikTok, this sale could impact video, right? Like, and the way video is utilized is maybe short form goes to the wayside, or maybe it becomes the only type of whatever. But so like, I get that, but social media was a thing just by being personal, right? By storytelling, right? That's how social media. I mean, that's what it
People
used to
wanted
be.
to share the story of their life.
They wanted to
right?
connect.
It used to be like your captions on like Facebook or MySpace or whatever was like Sean. You had to start everything with Sean. It was about you. It was about Cassidy. It was about Kirk.
Eating lunch right now.
Exactly.
Like,
About my dog.
You have to say, do you want it to be like that, where it is personal, where it is you're actually keeping it, like the idea of what social media was is I want to know what the people that maybe I don't live by, but I know them are doing. But like most things, it transitioned from what it started to into there's a way to make money out of it.
Right.
Now we can advertise. Now we can use the data. Now I don't want it to be so personal because now people aren't going to post as much. People aren't going to do that. I just think it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle.
Absolutely.
After it's asking a bunch of companies to stop making a bunch of money off of something that they rightly, created and transformed from, hey, how are you doing? I just had pizza for lunch today.
I think the biggest thing that, and I tell this to my kids and even we say it to our clients, is that you have to understand that social media is what people want to show you, not necessarily what's actually happening. But I do think from a brand perspective and a marketing perspective, I want everybody and everything that we do to show the most authentic picture of what we're marketing for our clients. Because I think that that's how, in the end, they end up relating to their ideal client, as we go back to that, and how they best market, how they best relate to somebody that they want to bring into their universe. I think being authentic and showing who you are, what you do, why you like what you do, what you love about what you do, in a storytelling perspective, I think becomes the most important thing that we do for clients, is help them put that together and share that with the world through all of these social media channels and opportunities, right? And hope that the authenticity doesn't get you banned. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Off the Record Marketing Deconstructed. For more information on the 5 and Rise Marketing Group, visit our website at 5andrise.com or follow us on social media at 5 and Rise. We would also appreciate it if you would subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast channel. We will see you next time.